Stardew Valley has a metric ton of unexplained, shrouded, and downright bizarre lore. From Caroline's possible affair, to Yoba, to whatever the fuck is up with Mr. Key, there are a lot of rabbit holes to fall down. And speculating about things that don't matter in the slightest is my one and only talent. Pelican Town, our main squeeze within the valley, is only one of many areas referenced throughout the game. The small glimpses we get of the outside world paint it as vast, but not all that peaceful. With hints of an ancient civilization, mementos of a raging war, and islands right out of reach, there's a lot of interesting shit buried below the surface. Stardew Valley itself seems to only be a pocket of the full story, and I want to wring Eric Baroni's brain like a dish sponge for all the information I can get. Today, we are going to chat about the Stardew Valley globe and attempt to piece together an image of what lies beyond our farm. Alright, buckle up my friends, we have a lot of scrapbooking to do. If you know Stardew Valley lore, you're probably aware that most of it is hinted at rather than confirmed. I did the best I could with the resources that are available, but if you want to curse my mother's name in the comments, feel free. As of the 1.6 update, we currently have about 7 geographical points to reference and 2 main nations. Stardew Valley itself is located within the Ferngill Republic, a nation that seems to include plenty of areas besides just Pelican Town. If we were to believe that Pelican Town is on the same physical Earth we have right now, coordinates that Harvey gives over the radio would place it somewhere in Russia. The exact area of the chords does not have a coastline though, so we can assume that the Stardew Valley globe is very different from ours, and that is confirmed by a map we'll talk about later. I got a PhD in Minecraft coordinates, so I'm pretty much an expert on the topic. You can go ahead and forward any comments about my expertise to maybesalem@harvard.edu. Pelican Town is, as you probably would know, the main location of the game. The area seems to have a rich history to it, with both an abundance of artifacts and some remnants of an old civilization. Over to the right side of the mines, we can find a dwarf selling wares who originally speaks in an unknown language. After you grab all of the dwarf scroll artifacts and visit him again, you will be able to understand Dwarvish, and he will tell you a bit more about his people. He'll mention to the player that the dwarves used to be purveyors of advanced technology, but no longer have any sort of access to it. The entire dwarf species now lives completely underground, but their work is dotted all around in artifact spots. Items like the Dwarvish Gadget and Dwarvish Helm can be found and donated. We never actually see any other dwarves while in the mines, but if the dwarves were thriving on the surface, why would they move underground? If we make good with the dwarf and get to know Krobus, a cutscene will play. It'll showcase the dwarf and Krobus getting in a bit of a scuffle, during which they'll mention the Elemental Wars, a conflict fought between the dwarves and shadow people. But, from what we're aware of, the shadow people lived in the valley before the dwarves ever did. It's said that the dwarves forced the shadow people out of their homes, causing them to resort to violence and begin the Elemental Wars. The war was fought for 1,000 years before it eventually settled, according to the wizard, but both species now live underground. The shadow people and dwarves are still at odds with one another, but they live in peace for the sake of the humans above ground. I don't know why I don't see anyone being all that kind to Krobus. I say be the smaller person. Sink lower. In the Lost Library book, Mysteries of the Dwarves, the author mentions believing dwarves are an alien species, which is very interesting technology-wise. This claim is further backed up by the dwarves calling themselves Smolanu, meaning sky people in their language. Although we don't know when exactly humans first appeared in the area, we do know from plenty of ancient tool artifacts that they've been around for quite a while. We can see a pretty clear evolution of skill from these artifacts too. You can dig up a hand axe, an early tool, and likely one of the first ever created. We can also see another metallic looking prehistoric tool going all the way up to an ancient sword with a hilt. If you're like, when are you gonna talk about Zuzu City? I'll get to it, okay? Let me get my nerd shit out first. Give me some time to breathe. The valley also has some specific cultural practices that differ from other in-game areas. On Twitter, Concerned Ape mentioned that the mermaid pendant is a Stardew Valley specific tradition, whereas people from the city use wedding rings for marriage proposals. So if you marry another player in a co-op save, that's why you use a wedding ring rather than a mermaid pendant. The Spirits Eve festival also seems to be region-specific, as mentioned in a Livin' Off the Land episode. The episode mentions that people around the Ferngill Republic, the nation Stardew Valley belongs to, are celebrating Spirits Eve, which is a weird specification if it's an everywhere thing, but I don't know. We'll talk more about the Ferngill Republic as a whole later on, but keep that in mind. Calico Desert, Pam's favorite drunk driving destination, is located on the upper left side of the player's map. It doesn't seem to technically be a part of the valley though, as Sandy often references Stardew Valley as a separate place in her quotes. She'll mention how much she loves flowers and gifts from the valley and ask about the weather over there. On the map itself, it seems fairly close in relation to other pieces of the map, so it's unclear how far Stardew Valley actually stretches outside of Pelican Town. On the subject of that map though, the Calico Desert seems to go beyond the area we have access to, and although Sandy says she almost went out of business before the bus to the valley was repaired, she hadn't yet, so we could possibly guess that there are more residents in the desert besides her, or that she specifically caters to travelers. We don't really know, but I would assume that there is at least some sort of population there. Calico Desert can spawn quite a few artifacts that point towards human activity being present there for quite some time. You can dig up a golden mask, lost books, a golden relic, and secret notes. The golden relic's description reads that it's etched with hieroglyphics and pictures, which obviously matches the Egypt theme going on here, but it could point towards the ancient desert dwellers having a different religion that did not involve Yoba. In other news that we're all incredibly aware of, Ginger Island is also here. The island is located in the Gem Sea, the mass of water off the coast of the valley. We can only see Ginger Island itself on our mini-map, but it's actually a part of the Fern Islands archipelago, surrounded by multiple other small islands. These islands are not accessible and are only mentioned in passing, but Willie grew up traveling around them. In addition, your dad can send you a letter that mentions retiring in a Fern Island bungalow. Most likely, one or multiple of the other islands in the archipelago are resorts of some type, as this letter can often arrive before the Ginger Island cutscene is unlocked. It's a bit odd to me that Ginger Island wasn't chosen to be one of these resorts if that's the case, but you know, there is a huge fucking volcano right there, so you win some, you lose some, I suppose. At least if you get burnt alive in the lava, you won't have to go to work, you'll have a nice long weekend. The only semblance of anything fancy on Ginger Island is Mr. Key's little Elon Musk room, so I doubt anybody's fiending to stay there until you show up and, you know, disrupt the ecosystem, but make it pretty. If you marry Haley, she will also mention wanting to retire on the Fern Islands. The other little guys in the archipelago also seem to have a healthy agricultural side, as Gus mentions using Fern Island ring fruit in his candy canes at the Feast of the Winter Star. The Fern Islands are obviously considered to be within the Ferngill Republic, stated in the description of a movie playing at the theater once it's unlocked. Of course, Leo, Birdie, Mr. Key, and Professor Snail inhabit Ginger Island, but the rest of the island seems to be primarily taken up by birds. The dwarves likely also lived on the island at some point due to the dwarf forge at the top of the volcano and the dwarvish sentries inside the dungeon. But there is also a dwarf currently living in the volcano dungeons, so there still could be more present. Birdie also relays a rumor that a dwarf civilization used to live on the island. There's also a possibility of a mermaid population, with the note block task summoning one out of the sea. It is interesting to note, though, that this mermaid looks very similar to the one at the Pelican Town night market in winter, so either they all look very similar, or this mermaid has a side gig. Ginger Island also attracts pirates to the pirate cove off to the right side, but they only seem to gather at certain times, and it's unclear where they even came from in the first place. Maybe they were on their way to plunder the richy rich areas of the Fern Islands, who knows. In the case of Professor Snail, he mentions that he's only been studying the island for about a year, so it's likely he's there on a research mission rather than being a resident. The bones we can find throughout the island seem to be fairly reminiscent of animals we have back home. Frogs and bats, which are found in mummified form, can still be seen in the mines and running around Pelican Town. The snake fossil and large animal fossil pieces, though, are not able to be obtained anywhere else. In terms of artifacts, there are little to none besides the fossils. You can find artifact troves in the ground, but no other signs of early civilization, which gives a bit more credence to the island lacking humans in the past. I don't have any great theories for the artifact troves appearing, but I think Mr. Key could have planted them, as he plants a lot of the loot in the mines and Skull Cavern. Can't be sure though, frankly I am just saying shit, so take it or leave it if you want. The snake fossil, by the way, does not seem to be related to the serpent in Skull Cavern either. They look very different when you compare them directly. Moving on from Ginger Island, we have a few smaller regions to discuss. Stardew has a habit of talking about places once or twice and never again, letting us know they exist, but nothing else. Do they have any real bearing on the game? No. Do you get to learn about them? Yes. Grambleton is a town mentioned in the game a few times, specifically in regards to materials. In Penny's 8-heart cutscene, the player has a dialogue choice that states, "There's no better lumber south of Grambleton in regards to Stardew's resources," which could be taken to mean it's a more industrial type of town. My apologies for the chain-smoking drawl I have going on currently. I'm recovering from something, I'm not sure what. Take it up with God, it's not my problem. In Clint's 6-heart cutscene, he invites Emily to the Grambleton Carnival, which could also mean it's a town for gross losers to try and drag someone to for a date. If you marry Elliot and get him to 14 hearts for some reason, he will go on a tour for his new novel. Again, Grambleton is mentioned in one of his letters, which reads, "I've just arrived in Grambleton to start the tour. I've forgotten how hectic the city is. The streets are packed with people. They either seem in a mad hurry or lost in a daze, unaware of their surroundings. I miss Pelican Town already." This gives more of a large Zuzu City type impression, which again we'll get to, but it's interesting that it seems to have a very lively scene to it. Two more locations, Castle Village and Prairie Island, are both barely mentioned in the game. Castle Village is simply stated as a producer of fine velvet in the earmuffs description, and Prairie Island is mentioned in the movie we talked about earlier. It's also mentioned to have an abundance of raccoons, which is definitely fun as raccoons have become a larger part of the game in 1.6. I am always down for raccoon lore of any type. Give me the raccoon lowdown, Mr. Ape, please. Journey of the Prairie King, the video game found in the saloon, is most likely a reference to the area as well. There's also likely a settlement toward the more frigid areas of the earth mentioned by Linus. At the Festival of Ice, he'll tell the player he learned to build igloos from the tundra dwellers, but no more is mentioned on the subject. They could be human or another species, but that's literally it. That's all that's said. Sad. Anyway, I'm sure you've been waiting for the Zuzu City section, and I really scraped the entire internet for any information I could find on it. We have the most information about Zuzu City compared to the other locations, but it's still barely anything. Obviously, Zuzu City is seen as the urban equivalent of Pelican Town. Many of the current Pelican Town neighbors relocated from the city, like Sam, Jody, Vincent, and Kent. It seems to be a pretty sizable tourist destination, as they have a gridball team called the Zuzu City Tunnelers that you can watch in Shane's 10-heart cutscene. Haley, the love of my life and god of creation, has also been there. She doesn't tell you that though, the Queen of Sauce does. Haley writes into the show to ask for her pink cake recipe after she tried it in Zuzu City, so perhaps the Queen of Sauce may be from there. This is most likely plausible since I assume a TV station that spans the Ferngul Republic would be settled in a large city. Leah's ex, Kel, also currently lives in Zuzu City, as said in Leah's 10 Heart cutscene. Leah moved to Pelican Town, obviously, but did once live there as well. The music scene in Zuzu City also might be significantly more lively, as Sam, Abigail, and Sebastian's band plays there in Sam's 8 Heart cutscene. This scene in particular can actually help us get some kind of idea about how far away the city is, and it doesn't seem to be all that much of a trek. Once the first part of the cutscene is triggered in the early morning, Sam will ask you to meet him at the bus stop at 4 p.m. You can arrive at any time between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. to get the other cutscene half, which has you take the bus towards Zuzu City. If we look at the map, there are 2 roads, one towards the Calico Desert and one that goes off screen. No actual in-game time passes during the cutscene, but the venue's lighting looks early to late evening-ish, so in theory, it wouldn't have taken more than a few hours to get there. The player doesn't seem to be explicitly stated to be from Zuzu City, but we can pretty much assume it. There is also a very interesting removed scene that confirms it. The beginning of the game was originally supposed to feature a cutscene inside the bus, where Haley, some random passengers, and a man named Dobson could be encountered. A woman with a child would tell you that they just got back from the Zuzu City Fun Park, and Haley would say she had just gone shopping. Dobson, the cut character who likely became Morris, talks to Joja Corporate on the phone. With his stupid, dumbass little rich boy haircut, he calls the residents of the valley unfashionable country rubes, saying that he'll have no problem getting the town to fork over land. This all points to the bus coming from Zuzu City, which is likely where the Joja corporate offices are that the player used to work at. Sebastian also talks about wanting to move to the city, and in his 10 Heart cutscene, you can get a view of the horizon atop the mountains. Zuzu City seems incredibly close if you can see it over the mountaintops, so maybe you're being a little dramatic saying you miss city life. I'm sorry. I mean, do whatever you want, go your own way, but it seems a little bit much for the situation. There's also the famed Goro Empire, which is the most interesting part of all of this in my opinion. The Goro Empire is a nation south of Stardew Valley across the Gem Sea, which is currently involved in a war with the Ferngul Republic. You've most likely heard of the Empire from Kent, who returns from fighting against it in Year 2. Kent has severe PTSD from his time in the military and recalls losing multiple friends in battle. There's almost no information on what caused the war or how long it's been ongoing, but it seems to be very bloody. Kent recounts prison camps he was trapped in when given a hated gift, such as algae soup and sashimi. He also says this when gifted holly, which is poisonous to the player, so the Empire was likely poisoning enemy soldiers. 2 books in the library, which are title only, are called Is War with the Goro Empire Necessary? A Unique Perspective by P.W. Kranzhauer, and A History of the Goro Empire. These books are really the only other in-town reference to the Empire besides those from Kent. But the traveling merchant does claim her goods are smuggled from there, so they may be cutting off certain imports or having an issue over production. Either way, we don't know if she's even telling the truth or not, so who gives a fuck? The war itself does not seem to have affected Joja Mart or the valley itself in any very noticeable way from what we know. However, we don't get a glimpse of what the area was like pre-conflict. We do, however, have a map of the Stardew world, which can help us get a good idea of what the geography looks like. The image we have of this map is basically Calico critter-sized, so it's incredibly difficult to tell any details from it. We're gonna give it a college try though, and if you're better with maps than I am, feel free to give me your ideas because I'd love to hear. Some super talented people have tried to label the map, and I'm gonna show you a few of those here. Most people agree that the locations shown are pretty plausible, so I feel comfortable sharing it with you. This map was made in 2016 or 17, 17, so it does not feature Ginger Island, but it's still helpful and neat. The user Jikawa labeled everything right here using Harvey's coordinates and general in-game hints, and that would encompass the entire Ferngale Republic. This map places Zuzu City a bit further south, which I don't know if I agree with personally because, you know, me, but it does show the Gotoro Empire right across the Gem Sea. We can also see a whole slurry of different islands here, so it's a bit hard to decide where we would want to put Ginger Island, but my best guess is somewhere right here. If these territories are all correct, that is kind of insane because there is so much unexplored land. But there are plenty of areas we can't quite place here, and likely a lot of different towns and cities that have never been mentioned by NPCs. Interestingly enough, though, we might find out more about the Stardew globe pretty soon. Concerned Ape's latest project, Haunted Chocolatier, was revealed to be set in the same universe as Stardew Valley, so that's fun. Keep an eye out, this may not be the end of the story. Anyways, that is all I have for you today, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I wasn't wrong about too many things, because I probably am. Is there anything I missed? Are there any places in the Stardew universe you want to learn more about? Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you with my whole heart, and thank you to my members. You're the best. Sorry for less videos lately. I am going through a very transitional phase of my life, so I'm trying my best, but thank you for being patient with me. I appreciate it. Stay safe, stay wonderful, my friends, and see you next time. Bye!